I call the clerk.
Government business, order of the day number 1, Water Amendment Bill 2015, in committee.
The committee is considering the Water Amendment Bill 2015 and amendments moved by Senator Leyonhjelm. Senator Leyonhjelm.
Thank you, Chair. This bill is proposing some sensible amendments to the Water Act to cap buybacks from farmers to 1,500 gigalitres, and I support that. However, I've moved 2 amendments which I think I should explain once again for the benefit of the chamber. The first amendment will counter water hoarding by the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. As the law currently stands, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder is required to hold and store water even when environmental watering plans have been fully utilised. My amendment removes the ban on selling water that is excess to environmental needs by removing a requirement to retain water if it can be stored for a future accounting period. This amendment, I believe, is supported, or this idea, I believe, is supported by the National Party, certainly by the Victoria Nationals leader, Mr Peter Walsh, former Water Minister in Victoria. And I don't see why it should not be supported, at least by the Nationals in this place. The second amendment that I'm proposing increases the total water that can be used by farmers in the basin by around 1%. This is a modest change and will benefit farmers, will not threaten the environment. The increased water for farmers is achieved by reducing water use reduction targets listed in the Basin Plan. Now, the government argues these sorts of amendments will fall out of their current review process and we shouldn't proceed with them now. Quite frankly, I think that amounts to the government saying we want our name on these measures, not your name, Senator Leyonhjelm. I don't accept that. We have a responsibility in this parliament to promptly amend Commonwealth law when a clearly beneficial change is before us. We shouldn't delay in the hope that bureaucratic committee processes will come up with something sensible in a timely way. These amendments do not threaten environmental outcomes, and additional water will also be available to farmers who wish to purchase it at a reasonable price. They will improve the Basin Plan and deliver practical benefits to basin communities and the environment. And it will also send a signal to the basin communities that we in this place feel their pain and are not indifferent to their trials. The inquiry I'm chairing will recommend more substantial reform, but in the interim these measured and modest amendments signal a resolve to improve outcomes and reduce the uncertainty of necessary water reforms. I do intend to call a division on these amendments, Mr Chair.
Minister.
Thanks, Chair. I have already spoken briefly to Senator Leyonhjelm's amendments, but given it's a new day of the Senate, I will touch on them again. I think at the broad level, the point that I would make in terms of the government's opposition to these amendments, and it's one that I reflect upon having been for most of the time of this government the responsible minister for water in the Murray-Darling Basin, and for a good period of time in opposition previously the responsible shadow minister, that it is a careful management approach required across the basin, not just careful management in balancing water use between economic needs and environmental needs, but also a careful management approach in balancing the expectations between those whose communities depend upon the river system for their sustainability and those, of course, who live alongside the river system in a different way, whose communities depend upon the health of the river system for its sustainability. That balance between water users' need for water and tourism activities and others' need for a healthy river. So there's a need to balance the environmental and economic outcomes. There's a need to balance those community expectations, and then there's a need to make sure in doing it that you actually are achieving support and agreement amongst the 5 different jurisdictions that have a role in relation to the operation of the Murray-Darling Basin system, and in particular the Basin Plan. That is not to say, Senator Leyonhjelm, that your issues aren't worthy of merit, but it is to say that in this instance, process, much as process frustrates you at times, and to be honest, it frustrates me at times, but process is actually important if we are to hold what is a delicate arrangement together for the health of the river and the communities who rely upon it. And it's important that we do work through with the states and territories any changes to the Water Act rather than simply bring them in and risk the support of the states and territories for the overall operation of that Act. I have given the commitment before that the government will, of course, be responding to the Water Act review, which was commissioned last year and finalised last year, and I know it provides some important recommendations in relation to how trading by the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder could be amended. It, of course, also presents those in a careful and nuanced way with a number of conditions about how such trading amendments could be enacted. I do want to note in relation to your amendments as they relate to the carryover of water, that carryover is an important function for any environmental water holder, just as carryover rights are important for irrigators. What we have in terms of establishing an environmental water holder is indeed a human intervention, a governmental intervention in trying to best replicate and best optimise environmental outcomes in what is now a highly regulated river system. The Murray-Darling, particularly the Southern Connected System, never outside of major flood events flows freely. It is a highly regulated system in which there are active interventions made to determine what is an appropriate level of flow in terms of managing the risk to property, in terms of managing access to water for irrigators, in terms of managing water quality, particularly in the southern parts of the system. And so, with such a regulated system, to try to best replicate environmental actions, the environmental water holder was established to be able to hold irrigation licences like any irrigator, and to be able to then use those licences in a way that can optimise environmental outcomes. And to be able to do that, the environmental water holder needs to be able to make decisions in some years to not use those allocations and to load them up for use in another year to be able to best replicate some of those environmental flows and to get the best and optimal environmental outcome. In terms of your overall package of amendments, there are areas where the government has concern about the nature of the amendment. There are other areas where we are sympathetic but do need to go through the proper processes. I appreciate your passionate interest. I appreciate your representation for some of the communities of the basin. They're communities whose passions and views I'm very familiar with, and I am eager to continue to work, as the government is, with you, with the crossbenchers, with your committee, with the opposition, who have continued a history of bipartisanship in this policy area, to ensure that future changes to the Act, just as those that the Senate, I trust, will agree upon today, are delivered in a way that continues support for the Basin Plan and water reform in Australia, rather than risks jeopardising support for it by any of the different complex stakeholder groups.
The question is that amendments numbers 1 and 2 on sheet 7752, moved by Senator Leyonhjelm, be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye. Against say no. I think the noes have it. Division required. Ring the bells. Lock the doors. The question is that amendments numbers 1 and 2 on sheet 7752 moved by Senator Leyonhjelm be agreed to. The ayes will move to the right of the chair, the noes to the left of the chair. I appoint Senator McEwen teller for the noes and Senator Leyonhjelm teller for the ayes. You don't have any more, do you? That's it for the minutes, yeah. Order. There being 6 ayes and 39 noes, the question is resolved in the negative. Question